Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Axel from Get Speaking English. Thanks so much for coming. Feel free to respond in the chat. I'll be watching the chat. And as you all know, I love it when people participate so we can brainstorm fantastic examples together, add them to our notes, and then use them as a reference later. So I hope you have all gotten a coffee. Start in just a couple minutes. And we're going to be talking about people today. And more specifically, B2 first and C1 advanced, part 1 and part 2 style questions. Where are you guys from? Feel free to say if you want. I'm from Canada, and today it is a lovely spring day, although it's really chilly. It's a very cold, it's kind of cold today, but it's sunny. It's pretty nice. So I can't complain. It's a lot better than snow. We've had some snow recently. A lot better. So I hope it's good wherever you guys are. Alright, like I said, I'm Axel from Get Speaking English, and we're going to talk about people today. Mostly we're going to be talking about personalities and characteristics of people. And like I said, we're going to be focusing on the B2 first, C1 advanced exam, part 1 and part 2 style questions. All right, perfect. So, and just a heads up, so this lesson is aimed at people who are preparing for the B2 first or the C1 advanced exam. However, this lesson should also be pretty helpful if you are preparing for IELTS, for example, various general English exams, or if you just want to reach an upper intermediate to an advanced level of English. So you should be able to get a lot of useful language out of this lesson that you can then apply to whatever you are doing with English. And like I already mentioned too, we're going to be looking at a lot of useful vocabulary for talking about this topic. We'll be looking at some collocations together, so words or groups of words that you always see together. Then we're going to look at an example question, brainstorm some different parts of the exam together, get some great ideas going so we can add them all to our notes. Then if there's time also, we're going to check out some phrasal verbs, so handy phrases that you'll be able to use also when you're speaking or writing. And then after, as always, I put everything together and then I share it on Discord, so you'll be able to find the notes on the Discord. And I also plan to upload this video on YouTube as well. Alright, perfect. So feel free to write in the chat if you want. Like I said, I love when people participate. That's really fantastic. And let's get going. So obviously we're talking about people, right? But what kind of subtopics might come up about this topic? Because obviously if we're talking about people, we could sort of touch on a lot of different things, right? For example, maybe, the work that people do, right? Um, the type of jobs that they do, for example. Um, maybe the advantages and the disadvantages of the different kind of jobs they do. Could you guys think of maybe some other things that might come up? Maybe the qualities that someone would need to work in a specific role? Qualifications also. So maybe something like that. Maybe also what we might call the workplace culture. That has to sort of do with sort of the feeling you get within a workplace, how people work together, how they behave towards one another, how you would feel working within that situation. So, so yeah, so how it feels to work in a place, how people work together, if you're overworked or underworked, stressed, that sort of thing. Maybe also education could come up. I mean, that could be another big thing. Obviously, we all go to school. Education's really important. Maybe, the types of education people have. So, maybe you go to like a public school. And so here, typically in the US and Canada, we're talking about publicly funded schools, which is different from private schools, which may be, maybe run by an organization or you would have to pay to go there. Whereas public schools are typically free. Also, maybe how you do that education. Right now there's a lot of online learning happening, right? A lot of people are learning remotely, right? So that could be something as well. Um, what else might come up with people? Maybe relationships. And maybe not just romantic relationships, right? Because I know that's sort of the first thing that tends to come to mind when people think of relationships. But there's also relationships you have with your family, with your friends, right? Basically, a relationship, you know, could basically be your rapport or how you are with other people, right? So how you are with each other, regardless of, your status or uh, how you know each other, right? So we could talk about, maybe the families, right? Maybe the type of families, right? Maybe the family structure, maybe. We might hear, nuclear family. The nuclear family generally consists of, like the mom, the dad, the kids. Then we could talk about the extended family as well. And when we start talking about the extended family, then we start talking about our relatives, people you are related to. So maybe aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, right? Everyone else. I also mentioned romantic relationships, so a romantic relationship might be anyone who you are romantically involved with. So could be a boyfriend or a girlfriend. We also might say a partner if we want to just be sort of vague about it. Also, since some people might say the words like boyfriend, girlfriend are a bit sort of juvenile, so it's common to also refer to somebody as our partner. Um, and we might talk about, marriage as well, right? And maybe marital status, right? So, if you're single, so you're not married, maybe you are, well, you could be married, you could be divorced as well. So, lots of different things that we could say. Oh, maybe also engaged. So if you're engaged, you've had the proposal, so you've been proposed to, and you are going to get married in the future. Yeah, it's also friendship, exactly. Friends are huge, right? Friendship, exactly. Friendships are really important, right? Um, maybe also, to throw out this word, acquaintances. So acquaintances might be people who you know, but they're not really close friends. They're not really friends. So these could be, for example, people you know in your neighborhood, or maybe at the grocery store. Maybe also, at school or at work, but you're not really friendly. So those could be your acquaintances. So the people you know, but you're not really super friendly or super tight with. We might say that we are tight with people. So when you are, tight with someone, you know them really, really well. So I might say, I have a really, we say I'm really tight with my brother, for example, so we have a very, very close relationship. So we're very good together. So colleagues could be another one. Colleagues. These are the people you work with, right? Exactly. So colleagues, I know that this word looks weird, but when we say it's colleagues, exactly. So the people that you would work with, maybe also, like your boss or we could also call them coworkers as well. Maybe business partners, so people that you do business with. And maybe the people who you sell your product to or your service to, we might call them clients. So the people who you sell your products and services to. So that's sort of another example of a relationship too. Yeah. Yeah, so lots of different things that might come up here when we're talking about people. It's so big, right? So let's think of some collocations now. So we're going to talk about collocations. So collocation, these are sort of two, three words that always go together. So 2, 3 words, oops, 2, 3 words, which always go together. So I'll give you an example, right? So in English we say to take the bus. So we always say to take the bus. We wouldn't necessarily use a different word with that. Or actually maybe a better one, for example, to miss the bus. In some languages it's more common to say to lose the bus. Oops, to lose the bus, but we don't say that in English. We say to miss the bus. So that's sort of an example of a collocation. So let's think of some collocations with the word personality that we could maybe use to describe personality. Say we can maybe, I'll give you an example. So we could say that somebody has a big personality. So somebody who has a big personality, maybe they are very, like, they come into the room and you know who they are. So it's very dominant, uh, maybe they're very opinionated. They are loud, they speak their minds, so they say what they think. So, for example, you know, she has a really big personality. Or actually, a better one might be, strong personality. So, for example, he has a strong personality and isn't afraid to speak his mind. So he's not afraid to say what he thinks. And people who have maybe strong personalities too, they maybe also they have an idea and it's hard to make them change what they think. So they don't really change their mind easily. Yeah, so we could say maybe that. So big personality, strong personality, strong personality. Um, Maybe somebody could be dynamic. So, for example, she has a dynamic personality, and she's always life of the party. If we say somebody's life of the party, they're the person who's, you know, sort of really happy, makes other people happy. They talk with people. They're very active. So in this case, if you have a dynamic personality, you probably have a lot of energy, maybe really positive, so you're very optimistic, right? Maybe also you're very, very creative. Yeah. So if you are opinionated, you are someone with a lot of opinions. Okay? So an opinion, for example, you always have a lot of things to say about something. You know how some people don't really have opinions and they're like, well, we don't really care about anything one way or another. People who are really opinionated, they tend to have a lot to say. So, yeah, so they have a lot of opinions. So, for example, my friend Mark is really opinionated. He always has a lot to say whenever we discuss politics. For example, maybe because he cares about that a lot, he has a lot to say. So he's really opinionated. Yeah. We might say that somebody has a bubbly personality. That's a good one. So a bubbly. So for example, so my friend Marie has a really bubbly personality. Um, it's just so, ooh, yeah, it's just so infectious and uplifting. It's a couple words in here. So if you have a bubbly personality, maybe you're very, full of joy, really friendly, laugh a lot. So that kind of person. And if it's infectious here, this here, it means that other people sort of start to feel that way too. So it makes other people feel that way as well. So that's kind of a fun one. And of course, if it's uplifting, something that's uplifting makes other people feel happier. So some great words there, definitely. All right. So, and let's think of maybe a couple nouns also that might go with personality. So we just talked about some ways that we could describe different people's personalities. Now let's think of some collocations. So some that goes with the noun personality, basically. So, for example, we could say personality type, right? Personality type. So to refer to the different kinds of personalities that people have. So for example, people with different personality types will all approach the same task differently, right? Because we all sort of have our own way of thinking or feeling or acting. So we would sort of approach tasks in a different way, right? So personality types. Um, you might hear personality traits, personality trait. And it's kind of another way to say characteristic. So some examples, for example, someone might be loyal, as in they're very faithful, they would never betray you, so they are very faithful. Or generous, for example. And you could think of some other personality traits. Down to earth, exactly. Someone can be down to earth. Exactly. So somebody who's very mellow, chill, doesn't, need extravagant things and have crazy ideas. Yeah, definitely. Maybe somebody could be, oh yeah, so I said generous, so somebody who likes to give. So could be money, money or other things. Food, that kind of thing. So somebody who gives a lot is very generous. Um, Maybe persistent. So for persistent, we don't give up easily. And we try and try and try again. So could be that, right? You might hear people too, maybe people who are open-minded. It's kind of nice. So people who are open-minded are willing to try different things, right? Experiment and are okay with accepting other people and other people's, opinions and without much judgment. So, yeah, yeah, people who are open-minded, that's great. Yeah, so all of these are great. Uh, Personality traits. So personality traits. Um, we might also talk about a personality quirk. So quirk is a funny word. So a quirk is sort of like a little thing that makes you different from other people. Um, so something sort of little, maybe odd, or something that's a bit interesting. So maybe, for example, maybe somebody requires maybe a lot of attention or reassurance. That could be their personality quirk, or maybe somebody could be an adrenaline junkie. So this is a person who loves maybe dangerous sports, or fast-paced activities. So an adrenaline junkie. Yeah, so this could be a personality quirk that somebody might have. Um, yeah. Oh, iridescent. That's kind of an interesting word. Yeah, so somebody could be iridescent. A bit glowing and shining. Yeah, definitely. Interesting. Right. Um, and another one that comes to mind actually, uh, so another collocation with personality. So personality work could be a personality test. And you may have even done personality tests for a job interview, but basically they are, questionnaires or tests to determine your personality. Um, there you go. Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, you don't hear iridescent used often to describe people necessarily. Um, it's more for like describing light or something like that. But that's a great, sort of a great word. Great, yeah. So personality tests. Right, so questionnaire. For example, there's like the Myers Myers and Briggs, I guess. It's the one that's sort of most I don't know if it's necessarily the most common, but it seems to be one that a lot of jobs use in particular. Um, it's a bit of a debate over how accurate they are. But yeah, people might take a personality test to figure out what kind of sort of personality they have, and they like to think that they could use that to figure out if you could get on well with other people or do the job well. All right. So, some great words here about personality. So let's actually get into some exam sort of style questions. So, part one, part one questions, those are sort of always the warm up questions. Um, and not, if you're unaware of how the B2 first and the C1 advanced works, it's done with a partner. So typically one person, sometimes you have two partners depending on how many people there are, but usually there's at least one other person. And at this point, you actually don't interact with your partner. So you don't have to respond to what they say, they don't respond to what you say. And these are basically just questions to let you warm up. And they're always going to be about you, your experiences, your thoughts, your opinions. So they're always going to be things that you'll be able to talk about because they're just about you. So, for example, your friends and family, maybe your home and your community, your country or the city you live in, hobbies, leisure activities, pastimes, things you like to do, your likes and your dislikes. So, all about you, basically, and what you think in your life. So, let's think of some questions that you might get asked in part one. So let's think of some questions. And feel free to write a couple questions in the chat, but what are some questions you might be asked? So on this topic. Um, and just as an example, maybe a question could be, what kind of personality do you have? I mean, that could be pretty basic. Or what kind of personality does your best friend have? Maybe. Um, Maybe if your personality has changed, maybe. So, for example, how do you think your personality has changed since you were a child, maybe? Something like that. Or, I don't know. How important is it to have friends with similar personalities, maybe? Yeah, maybe what kind of person are you? Maybe? What kind of person are you? Maybe how would you describe yourself? Maybe. Maybe, like, what kind of learner are you? You know? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe, maybe, like, are there any, do you think that people can change their personalities? Hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so are you a night owl or an early bird? Exactly. So if you don't know, right, a night owl, someone who prefers to stay up late, is if they prefer to stay up late and their minds are most awake at night, as opposed to an early bird, someone who loves to get up early. They have lots of uh, energy in the morning. Exactly. Yeah. So what could we say? So now that we have some good questions, how maybe what could we say for this? What could we say for answering this question? And you always want to expand a little bit, right? So I would recommend at least, answer the question directly, which is also important because some people like to start with a weird intro. We're just going to answer it directly and then maybe give a reason. And then potentially, if there's time, also an example. But I could say, so for me personally, I would definitely say that I am a night owl. So are you a night owl or an early bird? Um, so I would say that I am a night owl. Oops. For example, I always feel really creative at night and I am able to solve lots of problems and do more. I'm just too tired in the mornings to be creative, maybe. Something like that, maybe. So feel free to put an idea in the chat if you'd like for this. Or maybe somebody who is an early bird might respond with, you know, I definitely am an early bird. I always get up at the crack of dawn. So the crack of dawn, that is when the sun rises. So I always get up at the crack of dawn, and so I always get up at the crack of dawn and start my day with a run and some studying before I go to work. Yeah, maybe something like that. So, any other ideas? So part two, let's move on to part two. Second. All right. So yeah, so I am naturally an early bird. Yeah, so that's perfect. So I'm naturally, so by my nature, I'm naturally an early bird. The habit of getting up early grows up with me since my mom. Okay. So we're gonna turn this around a little bit. We might say, maybe I've grown up with this habit. Um, as when I was a child, my mom made it a rule. Maybe. Let's see here. So I'm naturally an early bird. The habit of getting up early. Yeah. I think we could say to get in a habit. So or we could say I've had this habit since I was a child when my mom made me get up early as a rule. So we might say something like that. Yeah, so I've had this habit since I was a child because it was a rule with your mom. Exactly. Yeah, that would do it. Definitely. So, great answer. Exactly. All right. So part two, we have this task. You get a sort of a page. B2 will have 2 photos on it. See What Advanced has 3 photos on it. For the B2 first, there's only 1 question. For the See What Advanced, there are 2 questions. But you have to compare and contrast the photos. So we're going to compare and contrast to the photos and answer the question or questions in 1 minute. So, after you have your talk as well, your partner will be asked a question about your photos. So we're going to be looking at these ones. We have sort of a guy off some power lines, sort of looks like they're in the back of an ambulance, or maybe a race car driver. And this question's going to be, what kind of qualities or characteristics would someone need to do these kinds of jobs, and how hard might it be to find good people in these roles? But let's just sort of focus in on the what we see first in the pictures. So, and I'm just going to number them really quickly. So picture 1, maybe picture 2, picture 3. So just what could we say about picture 1, photo 1? Obviously there's a man, right, working on maybe power lines. I might call those power lines. Or it looks like he's dealing with electricity, right? He's working on electrical lines, maybe. And he's very high in the air, right? I mean, it looks like a really dangerous job, kind of. Like, he's kind of balanced there. We might even say that he is he is precariously balanced. So if you are balanced precariously, or something is sort of standing precariously, it means it could fall down or fall over at any moment. So, uh, so you have to be very, very careful. And maybe there was some sort of, I don't know, there was some sort of like power outage. Or maybe he's just doing some maintenance, I don't know. So, and maybe that. Maybe he's doing some some upgrades or something. Or maybe fixing the lines. So feel free to put some ideas in the chat. Um, Number 2, maybe. It looks like they are, I'm gonna say, in the back of an ambulance, maybe? So in the back of an ambulance, because it looks like there are, they're not quite doctors, we might call these people paramedics. And it looks like they are working on a patient. We would say that paramedics will work on a patient. And that just is sort of a way to say that they are giving medical treatment. So yeah, so they are working on a patient in the back of an ambulance, maybe. Obviously, there are 2 paramedics. I would imagine that maybe it's a really stressful situation. Yeah, maybe, there was some sort of accident or something. And then for the third photo, we can see a race car, right? It looks like it is traveling at high speeds, right? We actually might call, so where they have a race, we might call that a motorway. So, or maybe a racetrack. Or there's a lot of different ways we might call it, but a racetrack. So racetrack, motorway, a race course as well. Yeah, also lane maybe. And this is actually, this job I would say is like pretty. This was pretty dangerous. I would also say that this one's pretty dangerous as well. So, a dangerous job. And, this one also very dangerous job, I think. But yeah, fast paced, as in, it's quick, right? Everything happens really, really, really quickly. Dangerous, high speeds. Exactly. So let's maybe just focus on, let's just focus on picture 1. Let's do picture 1. So we're going to focus on picture 1, and we're going to focus on picture 2. And we're going to think about the questions. So what can we say about the questions? So the first question was, what kind of qualities or characteristics would someone need to do these kinds of jobs? So let's think. So photo 1. So photo 1, if you're gonna be like a technician or a line worker, I guess you'd have to be very like alert, maybe alert and attentive, because you wouldn't want to get electrocuted, right? Yeah, it's a lot of stamina. Exactly. Especially if you have to hold yourself in that position for a long period of time. Definitely. Yeah, strong stamina. Strong stamina. Exactly. Yeah, maybe you'd have to be able to withstand discomfort for long periods, because I'm gonna guess that being like this is not comfortable whatsoever. So if you withstand that, you're able to tolerate it for long periods of time. Yeah. So able to tolerate being in a weird, uncomfortable position. Definitely. Um, I would guess maybe you'd have to be a bit patient, maybe, or um, because maybe it takes a while to fix. I don't know. All of these pictures are always designed to make you sort of think about things that you're not quite sure about, so you have to speculate and sort of guess about what's going on. So I'm gonna guess that you have to be, it requires patience. You need to be patient. That's my guess. I don't know. You wouldn't be, you couldn't have a fear of heights, I guess. We might say that somebody who doesn't have any fear is fearless. Fearless. So they would have to be fearless. I don't know. Any other ideas? Yeah, exactly. Maybe strong problem skills. Yeah, so, yeah. So you'd have to have exactly this really good problem solving skills and be really technical. We might say that you have to, um, have a lot of attention to detail. Be really, have a, be attentive and have a, yeah. Be brave as well, yeah. To be brave, exactly. So someone who isn't afraid, exactly. Or courageous. So you might want to have courage in a sort of dangerous situation. Yeah, so a little bit crazy. All good ideas. And picture two. So picture two. Again, what kind of qualities or characteristics might we need to do this? Well, I think you might need to be able to work well under pressure. Mm. So if you work well under pressure, you deal well with stress. So you deal with stress. Yeah, you deal with stress well, and yeah, you would have to have really good, medical knowledge. Exactly. You're probably highly educated, so have a good education as well, I think. Yeah, work well under under pressure. Maybe you have to be really responsive to changes. So if you're responsive, you are quick to respond to changes or challenges. Um, I would think too that this is one where you would have to have a lot of maybe have a lot of stamina because I would imagine that they probably work really, really long hours. Yeah, you probably also need to be able to drive and drive safely as well, right? Right, especially if you have to get to an accident quickly, right? So you have to be able to get there rush, but also be safe in the process. So that would be really, really important. Um, I'm gonna say that if you're a paramedic, you might be altruistic. And somebody who's altruistic is someone who, cares about other people and they're really selfless. Yeah. So if you're altruistic, you love to help other people. That's really important. Maybe you also have to make a lot of really quick decisions. So maybe you're a quick thinker. Have to make a lot of quick decisions. So lots of great ideas. So things that you would need to do that kind of job. And now let's think about the next question. So how hard might it be to find good people for these roles? So how hard would it be to find good people? So let's think of photo 1 again. Do you think that would be easy to find someone, or hard, or I don't know. So I'm gonna guess that this kind of job pays well, maybe. So, so not only pays well, but any kind of. It looks like you probably work for the city or something like that. So it's probably a job with good pay and benefits and all of that. So, those kind of jobs probably attract people. But it might be hard to find people with the right amount of training though. Yeah. Yeah, right. So you would have to hire people first. Yeah, so it might be hard because you'd have to hire people, give them training, and then see if they are fit for the job. So if you're fit for a job, that means you're good at the job. So, yeah, so that might be hard to figure out, right? Especially something like this, right? I think too that people might be a bit apprehensive. So, people might be apprehensive about working around electricity, right? Because they might be afraid of getting shocked or electrocuted. Exactly. There'll be a lot of safety concerns. Yeah, so, um, because, yeah, they have concerns about their lives and safety. Exactly. Yeah, so if you're apprehensive about something, you are not sure if you actually really want to do it. So, um, yeah, if you're apprehensive, you're not sure you want to do it because maybe you have doubts or concerns, and so, yeah, exactly. So, apprehensive. So, I'm always apprehensive whenever I do these live streams because I'm like, I don't know. So, if you're not sure about something, have some doubts, you're probably apprehensive. Yeah, so that would be hard. Exactly. I'm gonna guess too that there's probably not a lot of positions available, right? So there's not a lot of positions available, so they'd have to be really selective, maybe. They're highly about filling the position. So if an employer or a company is selective, that means they are really picky. So they are really picky about who they choose. So they think wisely, right? They think wisely and carefully about who they want, yeah. So maybe it's something like that. And what about paramedic? Being a paramedic. So photo 3. How hard do you think it might be to find paramedics? I mean, I think it might be a bit more common. I mean, I don't know a lot of people who work, for the city, for example, and work on the power grid or electrical lines, but I do know a few paramedics, so maybe it's a little bit more common. Um, so maybe for that reason it's a little bit easier. I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of people love to help other people, and maybe they are motivated to become a paramedic because they are altruistic, like I said before. I don't know. Although I'm guessing that it might be really challenging to become a good paramedic. Because it would require a lot of training. And I think when you're a paramedic too, like you're dealing with so many different types of injuries and accidents and illnesses and that sort of thing. So, I don't know. What do you think? Give a minute if you want to throw out some ideas. So sitting here, I'm thinking about the race car driver. Yeah, they lack knowledge in that field. Yeah, yeah. That's the thing about these questions is that um, they're often sort of weird questions that you may not have a lot of first-hand knowledge about. So they're intentionally sort of put that way, so you have to. So you're forced about talking about something you're not really comfortable about talking about, so they see how you sort of handle that situation and are able to speculate. But we had a lot of really good ideas, though, right? So, yeah. So when it comes to putting together everything, when we do this question, we always have to remember that, you know, we have to compare and contrast the photos, right? So we have to compare and contrast two of the photos and answer the questions. So, for example, we might use, while and whereas to join two contrasting ideas in one sentence. So, sorry, contrasting ideas. Yes, for contrasting ideas. So, for example, actually, I'm just going to copy and paste my example. So, you'd need to be really careful when working around electrical lines because you could lose your life, while being a paramedic would require different skills, right? So So we can sort of join those two thoughts together, either with a while or a whereas, and they become one sentence. So, I think this job would be easy, whereas this one, the other one, would be really challenging, maybe. So, two ideas, put them together with either while or whereas, or we could also use on the other hand or however, right? So, on the other hand, or however. And this is for sort of combining two together, but they are going to be different sentences. So, for example, on one hand, paramedics have a very important job because they save, the lives of many people every day, right? On the other hand, electricity is extremely important, and our society wouldn't be able to function without it. So it's important to have technicians, right? So you can see here that I have one thought in one sentence, and then we join it either with, well, in this case we're going to use on the other hand, but it will work the same if it was however. So on the other hand, so it's going to be two different sentences when we use on the other hand or however. So we can do that. And then of course we're always going to compare, right? So using our comparatives, our superlative adjectives. So for example, the workers in this photo need to work quicker in order to save a person's life, right? They would have to work a lot faster here because time is of the essence compared to this photo where maybe it's not as important, right? So quicker there, that's going to be our comparative. Maybe working around electricity would be harder because you could risk losing your life, like that. So I have a bit of a model answer. And hopefully it'll put it all together. But it's a bit of a quiz. So you can see here, I have a bit of an intro, and then I have some gaps. And you can see that we have the adjectives here. So we're going to fill in the gaps with the correct comparative adjectives. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that. I'm going to read the intro. So in one picture, we can see someone who looks like they are working on power lines, maybe because there was a power outage. While in the other photo, we can see paramedics who are working on a patient. I guess in order to work on electrical lines, you'd have to be very precise and careful. You wouldn't want to electrocute yourself, for example. Also, while working high in the air, you couldn't be afraid of heights, right? So I'm going to give you maybe a minute or two to think about these gaps. Keep going. There we go. Okay. That was my fault. That was 100% my fault. I'm so sorry. Okay. I'm still getting used to this. It's a bit weird. So I'm really sorry. I was just saying, so, okay. Actually, let's go back to this really quickly, and I'll give you the ideas. So, on one hand, sorry, yeah, so we worked here. Do we need this again? I think I just screwed up my video, but that's fine. So, I gotta read this really quickly. So on the other hand, being a paramedic would be slightly stressful and would require faster movements. You'd have to be able to make a lot of decisions, so you'd need to be more decisive. So we're going to use more here because decisive has multiple syllables. So more decisive, and you'd have to act quicker to respond to sudden problems or complications. And complications, those are just little medical problems that might come up during surgery, for example, or maybe if you um, are healing from an illness, maybe something you might take a medication that will cause complications, so other little problems. So I think both jobs would be hard to find people for. However, I think it might be harder to find people willing to work with electricity on the top of power poles, so up above the electrical lines. I think it might also be difficult to find paramedics. However, a lot of people like to work in healthcare because they want to help others. So, for that reason, I guess it might be easier to find good workers for this role. Um, so there you can see it sort of all together. Great job. And obviously this is it's a little easier to do this when we're typing, when we're thinking about it. But particularly on this part of the exam, we have to demonstrate that we could use this kind of comparative language while talking about these photos. So practice those, try to get used to saying them. And also, like we talked about, you'll have to speculate about these situations. So we'll use lots of phrases like I think it might, or maybe, so I guess, for example. So those kind of phrases, because we're never quite sure what we're talking about, but we want to demonstrate we could speculate, hypothesize, guess about what is happening. Yeah, all right, perfect. So again, so a couple of phrasal verbs, right? So we look up to someone, we admire them for their personal qualities, their achievements. As I said, when I was a child, I looked up to my mother. So I really admired her, thought she was great. She was really fantastic, and I wanted to be just like her when I grew up. Um, so feel free to put an idea also in the chat. Um, and it's important for people to have role models, right? So maybe, yeah, so it's important to have a good role model to look up to when you're younger. So yeah, so we can say that if we look up to someone, we really admire them. Also to get along with. So if we get along with people, we sort of have a friendly, sort of nice, harmonious relationship. There's no conflict or anything like that, right? So, um, for example, uh, here it's common to have roommates, especially when you're just sort of, or in university, right? So I don't always get along with my roommate, but she's a really good friend. So we try to keep it simple. If we keep something civil, that just means that we don't argue. Or maybe you get along with your siblings, for example. So my siblings and I got along really well when I was younger. So siblings, both your brothers and your sisters. So my siblings and I got along really well when I was younger, and now we have a really great relationship. Maybe something like that. We could also stand up for someone. So if we stand up for someone, we defend or we support someone, especially if they are going through maybe a challenging situation and they need some support, right? So, I always try to stand up for my friends when I see others treating them poorly. So you go to their defense, right? You try to support them that way. You might also stand up for the rights of other people as well. So, it's important to stand up for the rights of marginalized people. So, people who are maybe like poor people or people who are disadvantaged in some way, maybe because of race or their sexual identity. So we would stand up for those people, so stand up for their rights. You might say something like that. Um, we could also put up with someone. So put up with someone, which just basically means to tolerate someone's behavior or maybe parts of their personality that you don't really like. So, for example, my roommate is really messy, but I put up with it because they are a nice person. Maybe something like that. So you could tolerate it. Um, and maybe one last example. It's really hard. I feel like I'm hard to. I know sometimes I am hard to put up with, but I try to do. But I will be a good friend. Maybe I have some personality quirks that are difficult to deal with, but in the end, I'm a good friend, so it's worth putting up with those little quirks. Yeah. All right. All right. I'm gonna end it here. So thanks so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. Um, it was really fantastic interacting with you through the chat. Sorry about the little technical problems. This is still getting really new to the streaming idea. But thanks so much, right? And as always, we have lots going on. We have the C1 Advanced, we have Telegram groups for both C1 Advanced, the B2 first group, where I share lots of listening activities, grammar activities, lots more examples, lots of vocabulary and context. I try to prioritize sharing lots of content, both with audio and transcripts, because I know how hard it could be developing skills. I know how hard it can be to develop skills such as listening, so I try to prioritize that. Also, I have a speaking challenge that I do as well, where every day I share just a little prompt, and you could use that as a jumping off point to practice your English every single day. So you can find those on our main Telegram channels. Also on the Instagram, Facebook, I share them as well. We also have a Discord community as well, and I've set up some different practice rooms in there so you can go connect with other people. to get some language practice in without necessarily having to exchange contact information. So that is something there as well. And also recently I got a website up and running, which is really exciting. So there's lots of resources there for learning about these exams, material to practice with, check out model answers, things of that nature. And hope I might put this up. That was kind of a disaster when I didn't have the audio going. So, but maybe I'll put this up. Maybe I'll edit it out. We'll see. But again, thanks so much. I will share the notes though. The notes will be on Discord. The notes always go on Discord, and I link them. I'm going to be linking them on the page. Alright? So, thank you so much for coming out, and I hope you have a really fantastic rest of your week. And feel free to come out to our next live stream as well in 2 weeks at the same time. I'm going to be looking at part 3 and part 4 questions, again, about people. We're not going to be talking about personalities. I have something else planned, but we're still going to talk about people. All right, perfect. All right, so thanks again so much. Figure out my ending screen. Okay, bye.